June 18th, 1815, 7 p.m. Napoleon's final charge has failed. History is written, but what if it wasn't? What if just one thing changed? Not magic, not dragons, one change in the weather. The night before Waterloo, a storm turned the field to mud. It doomed Napoleon. But what if the storm passed? What if the ground was dry? World as we know, it was born from that defeat. But history is a web of turning points, moments where the future hangs in the balance. Imagine reaching back into that smoky hour and changing one small detail. Welcome to the Rise Relic. To create a plausible alternate history, we do not need to invent dragons or magic. We need only to identify a single simple point of divergence, a fulcrum upon which the weight of history could pivot. In the case of Waterloo, there are many small moments that could have shifted the outcome. Marshal Grouchy's failure to march to the sound of the guns, the sudden arrival of the Prussians, Napoleon's own ill health. But let us choose something even more fundamental, something that affected the entire character of the battle from its very start. Let us change the weather. A massive thunderstorm drenched the battlefield the night before. It turned the ground into thick, clinging mud. This mud was a critical factor. It delayed the start of Napoleon's attack by several hours. It gave Blucher's Prussians more time to march toward the field. More importantly, it severely hampered Napoleon's greatest asset, his artillery. The cannons could not be moved into new positions. Cannonballs buried themselves harmlessly in the soft earth. The cavalry found charges slowed and men exhausted by the quagmire. Horses sank fetlock deep with every stride. The battle was fought at half speed, robbing the French of shock and awe. So here is our one simple change. The storm of June 17th is less severe. A light rain falls. By mid-morning on June 18th, steady wind and warm sun begin to dry the ground. The battlefield is firm, springy turf, not a swamp. This single alteration has cascading effects. Napoleon begins his assault at 9 a.m., not noon. His grand battery of cannons is manoeuvred with speed and precision. Gunners can see where their shots land and adjust aim. A storm of iron smashes holes in Wellington's infantry squares. The moment the Imperial Guard pierces the Allied centre is the moment the battle is won. A line of defence that has held for hours through sheer grit and determination finally shatters. Panic, a contagion more deadly than any bullet, spreads like wildfire through the ranks. Regiments that had stood firm against cavalry charges, and regiments that had withstood cannonades, now dissolve as they see the legendary bearskins of the Guard advancing behind their lines. The cry goes up, "Sauve qui peut!" Save yourself if you can. A disciplined retreat becomes a chaotic rout. Soldiers throw down their heavy muskets and run. Their only thought, escape the unfolding disaster and the pursuing French cavalry. The Duke of Wellington, who had managed the defence all day, finds himself caught in a maelstrom he can no longer control. His attempts to form new defensive lines with his reserve units are futile, swept away by the tide of his own fleeing men. The thin red line has been torn apart. The nearby Prussian forces, still marching toward the battle, arrive not to support a wavering ally, but to find a victorious French army consolidating its position on the field. They would be too late. Facing Napoleon's army, flushed with victory and momentum, Blucher is forced into a difficult choice: risk his own army in a desperate and likely doomed attack, or conduct a prudent retreat to save his men for another day. With the Anglo-Allied armies scattered and the Prussians held at bay, Napoleon stands not as a defeated exile, but as the master of the field. He would not flee back to Paris to abdicate. Instead, he would march his victorious army north. His immediate objective would be Brussels. A map of Belgium showing the French army marching from Waterloo towards Brussels. The city would fall without a fight, its leaders either fleeing or offering submission. The victory at Waterloo would not be a minor tactical success. It would be a strategic thunderclap, a stunning reversal that sends shockwaves across the continent. News of the victory reaches Paris first, igniting massive celebrations. But the news is received very differently in other capitals. In London, the shocking truth of a catastrophic defeat grips the city's financial markets. The fear of a French invasion is rekindled. The victory utterly transforms Europe's political landscape. The Seventh Coalition, Britain, Austria, Prussia and Russia, is thrown into disarray, its unity fractured by doubt and fear. Napoleon is no longer a prisoner, but a victorious general at the head of a battle-hardened army. The immediate question for the Allies: continue the war or negotiate? Napoleon, the masterful opportunist, exploits these divisions, sending out peace feelers. He would likely propose to accept the 1792 borders of France in exchange for recognition of his rule. The new European order, a negotiated world. With Napoleon on the throne, a powerful, dynamic France remains at Europe's centre. The conservative monarchies of Austria, Russia and Prussia are checked. The ideas of the French Revolution, codified in the Napoleonic Code, are not suppressed, but a living reality with a powerful state sponsor. Nationalist movements find an ally in Paris. German and Italian unification follow a different path, guided by French interests. Britain, never trusting Napoleon, pursues a Cold War of containment. This creates a bipolar rivalry. British maritime power versus French continental power, shaping diplomacy and trade for decades. Napoleon's model of a modernized, centralized state becomes the template for reform. Europe becomes more efficient, more standardized, but perhaps less free. The consequences of a Napoleonic victory would not be confined to Europe. They would ripple outwards, reshaping empires across the globe. Great Britain, the global hegemon of our 19th century, would be challenged. A powerful French rival would force London to divert resources from colonial expansion to defence. The Pax Britannica might be less peaceful and less British. France, under a continuing Napoleonic dynasty, would be a far more aggressive colonial player. The competition for territory in Africa and Asia would become a direct extension of the Franco-British rivalry. The trajectory of the United States would also be affected. A weakened Britain might alter disputes over territory, while a confident Napoleonic dynasty could intervene more assertively in the New World. In Latin America, Napoleonic France might see an opportunity, pulling newly independent nations into its orbit and creating a truly multipolar world. Society and ideas, the enduring Napoleonic legacy. Beyond the grand sweep of politics and empires, the cultural and intellectual life of the 19th century would be transformed. In our world, the Romantic movement in art and literature was partly a reaction against cold rationalism and the tyranny of Napoleon. A victorious Napoleon would change this dynamic. Romantic fascination, nationalism, romantic fascination, folklore, romantic fascination, medieval history. These passions might be tempered or take a more revolutionary character, aligned with liberal ideals sponsored by France. French would likely remain dominant in diplomacy. French would likely remain dominant in culture. French would likely remain dominant in science, slowing the rise of English as a global language. The Napoleonic Code emphasized legal equality, religious tolerance, property rights. That code would be more deeply entrenched across the continent. In lands under French influence, the framework would have generations to bed in, shaping social relations, shaping economic development. The old aristocracy, the church, would be broken in many parts of Europe, accelerating a secular bourgeois society. A more modern, rationalized world, but also one where the state held immense power over the individual, a core Napoleonic tenet. Scientific and technological development might follow a different course. Napoleon patronized science and engineering, seeing them as vital to military and industrial power. France would invest heavily and could rival Britain in industrial leadership. Major projects, railways, canals, electricity, might be driven by state-led French initiatives rather than British private enterprise. Industrialization could be more centralized and planned. Ultimately, the idea of Europe itself would be different. Instead of competing nationalisms rising from Napoleon's ashes, a unified Europe, or a federated Europe, bound by a common legal code and a shared administrative system, championed by Napoleon, might gain traction. The dream of Europe would be linked not to post-Westphalia peace, but to Napoleonic conquest. That creates a powerful controversial legacy, a tension between the appeal of unity and the fear of French domination, shaping European thought for a century. In our world, Waterloo ended Napoleon. It paved the way for a century of British global dominance and the English language. The 19th century tilted Anglo-American. In the other, a French-dominated Europe remains, where revolutions find a patron in Paris. Order is modern, but managed. This exercise reminds us that the world we inhabit is not inevitable. History often turns on the smallest of hinges, a field that dries, a messenger who is late. For want of a dry field, an empire was lost, and the world we know was born. What other historical what-if should we explore? Tell me your idea in the comments. It could be our next video. If you want to join this journey into history's forgotten paths, please subscribe to Rise Relic. It truly helps a small channel like ours grow.